you get extra credit when you are being yourself and people do see the flaws, and perfection's overrated. Then no one trusts you if you think you know everything, and just be yourself. And if I could be successful, anyone can. That's just no question.
I love that.
Hey baby, it's time for the Nikki Alpert Podcast. Come on, pull up a chair. We gonna have some fun.
Hi, Tami.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm so glad to see you. You guys, this is Tami Holzman, and a friend of mine introduced me to one of Tami's books, From C Student to the C-Suite. Now, first of all, it was a bestseller on Amazon within 3 days of its launching, right? That's how the deal was there?
Yes.
Amazing. That must have felt incredible.
Thank you.
And you're working on another book, right? That's about to come out?
I'm a contributor to a book that's called Crazy Amazing During Difficult Times. And the same way with my book, sometimes you don't know if you're qualified, but you're going to go with what you know works.
Yeah.
So I wrote a chapter on being empathetic, and I wrote it pretty similar to how I wrote From C Student to the C-Suite, which is taking potentially serious topics and diffusing them and adding a lot of humor. Humor is, for me, and a lot of other experts would say that humor is the unifier and a huge healer. And so humor is like, to me, it's one thing I had going for me when I used to question my self-worth or being smart enough. Was I had this personality kind of plus, and I think I knew how to make people laugh, and I was a goofball. Think Lucille Ball, you know?
Yeah.
So everyone's my Ethel. Like, just one shenanigan after the other, but my heart was always in the right place. So
the beautiful thing about that is that you're helping yourself because you're being the silly one in the room that's getting the attention that makes you feel good. But the reason you feel good is because you're making other people comfortable. And
right.
So, right, you're using what you have because it makes you feel better. And you also know that lightening the mood for everybody we're all so uptight. We like to pretend we're not. But I mean, look, you even talk about how CEOs are sort of one-sided and it's lonely up the top, and none of us are fitting into every single moment perfectly fine. There's some chatter in our head that's telling us, hey, this is not perfect. And your ability to grasp on to that, obviously at an early age, and your awareness of your emotional intelligence and how you used it to get through obviously elementary school and high school and then through college and climbing to the top of the CEO C-suite ladder. Like, it's remarkable that you did that. And I think based on the book you're writing, the new one, and that article that I want to talk about that you sent me today, I think that being an emotionally intelligent human being helps so much in times like these.
I think so. Yeah, it helps. I mean, right now, it should be a huge focus for people to tap into how people are feeling and being self-aware. Even prior to COVID, the reality is we're all humans first before we're CEOs, before we're rock stars, before we're mothers. So it's understanding that, and you could set the tone for the comfort of a room. So if you walk into the boardroom, you don't have to wait for someone else to set the tone and emulate their behavior. Go in and set the tone. Be lovely, be warm.
Yeah, make it a happy, lovely tone in the room.
Exactly. Break down the barriers. And that's going to create a much more successful meeting, and a meeting of the minds, because people are going to be relaxed. They're already going to be smiling. They're already going to be enjoying the experience.
Yeah.
Instead of being intimidated or why am I here if there's an executive, and just going through the motions.
Right.
When all of a sudden it's nice to be around people. It's amazing how much you would like to work with them.
Especially now that we haven't worked with anybody in so long.
Yeah, I mean, right now, there's so many things with emotional intelligence and self-awareness going on today.
That's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about your expertise in the boardroom, but I want you to tell people now, as smart as you are and as well as you've navigated using this, I want to talk about how you could suggest to people that they focus more on this during this time, all sorts of ways.
I think that there's been a few articles lately that came up, and you touched on it, saying lonely at the top, right? It's really lonely at the top right now, because the sense of responsibility and questioning, are people making the right decisions during a really scary time in our life with not only like COVID, but also just the underlying tension going on with, politics and the pressure at home, and having a pandemic, and whatever other things you might be going through. Like, people have their own medical issues, each one of us, or their parents, etc., or their children, and at school, and balancing. There's so many touch points that so many people are going through. So part of emotional intelligence is being self-aware enough to say, I am a little overwhelmed, and to be able to ask for help or be able to acknowledge it. And that's going to change the dynamic for people that are working with leaders.
It's going to change the dynamic for everybody and everything. I mean, Tami, I speak to people now who have kids between 5 up to 20. Mm-hmm. And for the first time ever, they're having emotional check-ins with their children daily. Not like, oh, my kid hasn't come out of the room in 3 days, whatever. Like, daily, they're like, babe, how are you doing today? And I think even in homes, the emotional intelligence. The emotional
a lot of TV right now. There's a lot of television right now.
I think it lacks at home usually.
If it's lacking at home, it's lacking at the office, I'll tell you right now.
If you don't give
even if you're working from home. So it just means you're not able to exercise what these emotions are, what's happening, and being able to feel what's happening in emotional intelligence. Because it's one thing to understand emotional intelligence, but there's part of the exercise component of managing these feelings, right? And being aware of them and being able to pivot on them.
Every time you say pivot, I think of the Friends episode, pivot with the couch.
Oh. I think someone just showed that on a coaching exercise. They did.
It's all about getting into the spaces that are hard to find and get into, pivoting. But it's a perfect example. If you guys haven't seen it, watch it.
Someone did just use it on a pivot webinar. It's really funny. It's really funny. But it's when you're sometimes the emotional intelligence is like, there's a likability factor. And I think people get it confused, because there's innate traits where like people happen to be funny, or they're pretty, or they're things that people sometimes it's like an artificial attraction, right? Mm-hmm. But if you ask like the 5 character traits that people want to work with, it's something we can all have. They're trustworthy, they're caring, they're open, they're empathetic.
So true.
So those are what we're driven to. Right. We can all have high EQ. Yeah. Focus on those traits, because people want to work with people they trust and people they like. That makes them like you, because they're going to have their back.
And earlier you said that if you don't have it at home, if you don't practice emotional intelligence at home, you can't bring it to the office. And so that takes me back to like how if you don't learn things at home, or if you do learn things at home, what kind of adult that makes you, right? Obviously, besides COVID making it so that we're all so much more aware of each other emotionally, because we're all on the verge of breaking down every 5 minutes.
That's good though, because it means people's hearts are open. Yeah. And this is a time to try out the skill set, because people's hearts are open, they're vulnerable.
And I think we've moved away from that so much with the computer age and the texting and the not talking and all of that. So I love that we're like, if we're going to look at the silver lining of things, right? Then what if the silver lining of this is, it's making people crave the connection again. Mm-hmm. But have you ever thought about getting behind some sort of bill that could make that part of the curriculum, K through 12, for like emotional intelligence in school?
There was a moment where we were creating, actually the person that is, the one that brought up Crazy Amazing as a concept, she was a principal of a school. So we were looking to create a program, and there was a grant that there would be a curriculum that would go into school. So yes, I have.
And
I have, but in the process. It's in the process. Yeah.
I would love to work for that at any time. If you guys need anybody to do anything, let me know. I would love to be part of that.
And then there's also, coaching that could be brought in earlier to companies, people at every level. Because sometimes the senior executives get coached, but the younger people or the more junior people aren't getting coached. And I think we so much learn from each other. I often say to people, your mentors as a senior executive should be the younger people. You should be learning from
You're missing
them.
out on the new stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think what happens when we're not communicating at home, and the most likely, if you're not communicating at home, you're probably not communicating in the workplace, because guess what happens? Communicating leads to vulnerability. You're confronting, you're having real conversations.
Constructive conversation.
They could be scary though, because we don't want to always hear. I mean, I had a real conversation on the phone on Saturday night, spontaneous, with someone, and I was like, ouch, it hurts to hear how sometimes you make someone feel, even if that's not what you're feeling inside.
Came across that way for some reason.
It came across that way, and it backfired. I wanted, somehow you have different roles with different people, but I was overcompensating on my care package, which didn't let other people take care of, you. So there's so many real conversations you can have at home. Yeah. But they're hard, because that means you have to
expose part of yourself.
Expose yourself.
Yeah.
So most likely, when I was thinking, when we're not doing it at home, the likelihood of not doing it at work, because it's scary. It's scary.
Who wants to be exposed at home or at work most of the time? And you know what I mean? I just lost my train of thought. I'm so bummed.
You were talking about I
remember
school.
I was, but which, by the way, I think is a great idea. I honestly think that more of that should be incorporated into the curriculum for young kids, and coaching. Like, I think back in the day when they brought in counselors, I think that was the idea. But counselors always if you got in trouble, you went to the counselor, or if you were in trouble,
it was a punishment instead of a growth.
It's got to be reintroduced in a way, and maybe it's called a life coach instead of a counselor at school or something like that. It's all about the marketing to make the kids.
That's interesting. I think you did go to counseling when you were misbehaved, and I think misbehaved was probably identified really wrong. Like, I'll give you an example. There's a Yale course. There's a whole Yale program about emotional intelligence, and I had gone to a fundraiser in Los Angeles because after the book, I got a much deeper interest in just learning as much as I could about emotional intelligence.
I love that. Me too now, by the way. I've watched I'm reading books. I just can't stop.
It's so fascinating.
It is.
So there was the guy that leads the program and is also speaks, and I'll give you his name after. Right. But people could look up the Yale program. But you
might as well mention the guy so that people could watch that too. But you can't.
I'm gonna look it up. I will look it up. I'll look it up while we're on the phone. It's okay. I have what I call a brain fart. I'm totally okay with
Been there.
It doesn't have any less than my love for this guy and his one of his talks. But the point being they're incorporating their emotional intelligence program also to schools, and trying to get more schools to adopt the importance of being in touch with the feelings portion of learning about themselves and the reaction. But there were some really disturbing things he shared that day in the fundraiser. And there was a video clip of someone not understanding a math question, one of the kids, and he got sent to a corner and basically with a dunce cap. And
I was going to say, how humiliating, right?
What does that do to a child? Do they ever want to speak up again that they don't know something?
No.
You should be able to say, I don't understand this. Can you explain it differently? I'm struggling. Yeah. No. When they got punished
taught them to shut up.
And to go away from those feelings because they were humiliated.
Yeah.
And one question that they asked the children was, what are the three feelings the 3 words that would describe how you feel in school. And that was, I think there wasn't a dry eye in the room with all the parents, and I'm not even a parent, and I was bawling.
But you have been a kid, so it doesn't matter, and
Well, it's very parallel to adult thinking.
Yeah.
So the kids were bored, stressed, and tired in school. Well, how effective are you when you're bored, stressed, and tired? What do you get done?
Nothing.
Yeah. And they're being punished, and these are the feelings that they're having. So how do you start to change the way children are learning? It's so important.
Yeah, and it starts at home with asking how school was, and not just, looking at your phone and rolling your eyes when your kids talk. I mean, you got to give them the space, and the teachers too. And I don't remember being totally humiliated in class, but I certainly remember stories of teachers being mean to kids who, even if they're acting out because they're bored and stressed and tired, you know what I mean? Like, it's got to be brought into there so that as adults, we can handle things like the 2020 pandemic. I mean,
right.
and help each other handle it, because you're not meant to go through this alone.
It's a concept. As much as you, like, I would say, I feel like I'm highly emotionally intelligent. There's always that curveball of a conversation that makes me think, wow, I wasn't as self-aware as I thought. Because that's when you really hit the pinnacle. But by the way,
who is?
I'm to the place, but here's the good news. And this is what everyone should strive to be. I'm to the place where I can hear it. I can acknowledge it.
Right.
What do you usually want to do? You want to avoid things that don't feel good.
Of course. And also, I think that being incredibly emotionally intelligent doesn't mean that you're perfect at everything that makes people emotionally intelligent.
Well, if you can acknowledge you're not perfect, that is a sign of emotional intelligence.
Right. So so it's kind of the same old, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? It's a collection of things that make you emotionally intelligent, not the score of, not the 5.0 GPA. Right. Speaking of that, so we made reference.
By the way, back to the Yale guy, so if anyone wants to take note, his name's Mark Brackett.
I saw you looking that up.
You can look up just emotional intelligence, the Yale program. There's some great videos. There's ways to get involved if people want to, it's a program that's really important in raising money. So, anyone that can have an emotional interest in the next generation and our health of our generation today would be to tap into a little more EQ. Yeah. It's not going to hurt. It's going to help your life.
Say his name again, Mark
Brackett.
Mark Brackett.
Brackett.
Perfect. Okay. So earlier I mentioned that you sent me an article this morning for my daughter, and you guys, I kind of expressed to Tami that while it takes a village to raise children, if I send my daughter the article that you sent me, she won't read it. So I'm going to give you her email, because if you send it, she'll read it.
Okay.
That's just part of, you know what I mean?
Parents don't know shit.
Yeah. And even if we do, they don't want to hear it from us. They want to hear it from somebody else.
It's because it feels nagging from parents. It's psychological. They know you know. They'll know later you know best.
Yeah. So she'll probably also know that I asked you to send it, but even that will be better to her than having
Of course she'll know. You're giving me the email.
Exactly. So, but in speaking about the online teachings that you and I learn from now, because we're not in school anymore, and the article that you did send me today about how the universities, over 400 of them, are not, obviously they can't take the SATs and the ACTs because the kids didn't take them. So their admissions applications are different these days. And they also are not able to add, the kids aren't able to add their extracurricular activities, right? Because they couldn't go anywhere. So the article was based around the fact that they're asked to write personal stories about overcoming and dealing with the pandemic, right?
It's amazing. Adversity.
And do you think that people with emotional intelligence or a higher emotional intelligence have an easier time of navigating their way through this?
My guess is yes, just naturally. They're coming from a feelings perspective, like, what is this, how do I feel during this time, and how has it affected me? Just taking a second look, and what is there can I find some purpose in this? I think it's more natural, and maybe can untie that knot that feeling. Instead of just, there's, I would say if you're going for logic, there's not, logic is the IQ
None.
side, right? It's the 15%. It's so hard to find the logic in all of this. So I'm guessing to people that with the 85% of your success goes the emotional side, right?
Right.
That somehow it's easier for them to find meaning and purpose and maybe overcoming adversity just a little bit easier. But hopefully the people that really focus on logic, it's forcing them to explore a side that they're less comfortable with.
Yeah.
So
it's funny because I'm married to a guy who's very logical and has a very high IQ. And I mean, not that I've ever asked him what it is, but just, you know, he's different than me. And so
you just know.
You just do, you know, and he is not that emotionally intelligent sometimes, but I think maybe all wives say that about their husbands. I'm not sure, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that like all day long, he listens to the news and he collects data about what's happening in the world with the politics and the COVID, and it's enough to make you crazy. That's my blood sugar meter making noise. Sorry.
Have a gummy bear. It's not that kind of gummy bear, people.
Oh yeah, no, it's not that kind of gummy bear.
It'll be more fun though.
And if
we should have both had gummy bears and then did this.
Except, can you imagine we'd be talking for 9 hours?
It would be fucking fun.
It'd be hilarious. We'll do that after, just for us, and then I'll put it up like another time. But I think that he collects so much data all the time, and he's not really dealing with it emotionally. I mean, he'll say he is, but I don't think he does. And then my daughter and I, who are so connected emotionally to it all. So at the dinner table, when my husband is throwing facts out about what's happening in the world, and my daughter and I are talking about how we feel, it's a very divided table. And I think that has a lot to do with what's going on in the nation, too. People are collecting facts from the news. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's also something out. There's another layer to that. Women are by nature more emotionally intelligent than men. So it's easier for us to tap in and work on that, because with men, they associate the feelings of being vulnerable or being scared
as soft, as weak,
and being ashamed of it, and as a negative. So it's an association that they've been taught from when they were early in a kid, like boys don't cry.
Right.
So sometimes it's not by choice. They've been told not to do it by society.
It's a learned behavior with no emotional intelligence in the house.
That men don't cry, right? And they're supposed to suck it up. And it's my second book was, if I'm forced to talk about it and forced to work on it, but it was about men and vulnerability, and still coming from the serious but loving and funny place. But team for the guys, they read my book and they're like, okay, this book is so good. I wish there were books like this for men. And I think the men don't look at it as a book just for girls when they read it, because feelings are feelings, they're human nature. It's just they've been told to avoid it and that there's shame attached. Yeah. So it's they have to work twice. If it's hard for women to have these conversations and communicate and
be vulnerable.
Be vulnerable. It's hard for women.
Yeah. So
imagine the layer of how tough it is for guys.
Yeah.
So you have to cut slack, but they have to understand that there's just remind them of safe space, because when they do go there, they feel a lot better.
Yeah. Even
if they feel forced to.
Yeah, which is hard you don't want to force anybody to do that, but just keep opening the door and
more questions that are feeling questions.
Right.
And less questions about logic, but reading that article, how did that make you feel?
Yeah. Maybe I'll try that at dinner.
Yeah. I mean, there's ways, if he thinks logically, to ask how he feels about a logic, something he's bringing up.
Yeah.
Well, did that upset you? Oh, really? Why did it upset you? Yeah. I mean, not even stay away from why.
Right.
Why is a negative connotation?
Yep, that's right.
What made you the same way that it has a negative connotation, like for children? Why did you do that? Why did you do that?
It's not good.
Right?
Yeah.
So how did that make you feel? Well, dig deep with the how and the feeling. How and the
So
what made you?
If you, based on the article, going back for a second, if you were to reapply for college now, and you had to share your story about navigating through this.
Yeah.
Like if my kids had to do it now, I think my son would write some sort of dark cartoon, all humor based, about being locked in the house at 21 years old with his sister and his parents.
I think that's amazing, by the way.
Yeah. And I think my daughter, go ahead.
He's able to, I was thinking when you were talking about him earlier, I was thinking about how he's in a really unique situation because he could create another world that is communicating.
Right.
And it
through somebody else, and
which is probably very personal to him, but he gets to create a visual world, which I'm sure would be really good for, really interesting, just good lessons from a man's point of view visually.
Right. Yeah. And so my daughter would probably record some sort of very dramatic classical song, but she would record it. She would play her drums, her piano, her bassoon, her guitar. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Schools wouldn't want to see movies and recordings to get into them. But I wonder if now that they're really looking for these personal stories, if they might understand that not everybody expresses themselves best in a 5-paragraph thesis essay, and that it might open the doors for emotional intelligence to show its way.
I mean, I pretty much finished mine is 3 credits,
right.
But one of the things I did in class once was an art class, and they wanted us to do reports, and I was like, I'm going to just totally go a different way. I created a rap song, and rap was in, right? I created a rap song.
Still in, by the way.
I know. Okay. But based on, with the 80s version.
Mm-hmm.
The rap song based on, an artist. And I told a story through a song. And it was kind of funny and kind of ridiculous, but creative.
And did you get a good grade?
The most, I think I did good. I think anytime I was able to just use my expressive and they were open to
be
it,
yourself.
Be myself. And anytime I felt challenged in the right way, like I didn't have to take a traditional course, like here's books, memorize it, and take the test. I'm not going to do well in that environment. If you could teach me and inspire me, I'm going to do well, even if it's really hard for me, because you're going to get my interest.
Yeah. And they should learn how to pique the interest of every student and not think that every student, what's that famous, I think was it either Einstein who said you can't teach a fish to climb a tree?
Yeah, it is Einstein. Very good.
Right? So it's like, there should be ways that teachers?
It's okay. Get the story straight. I always get the story straight.
That was good. Teachers get the story straight.
Get your story straight.
But teachers should be able to teach every kind of student. And, there's not 75 different kinds of students. I mean, like, I had twins, and much like you and your brother. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was teaching them to read, or that one was an audio kid and one was a visual kid. It was very clear to me that same birthday, same everything, they didn't learn the same way. Right. And if teachers could learn to do that and implement it not only in K through 12, but those boring 300-room classes at the universities where the straight A students are collecting data and they have no time to think or talk or do anything, and all the other people are so bored and they just do what they can to pass the test because their mind is set on dreams for the future and things. They're not stuck in the moment collecting data. The
attention span is so much different than when we were going to school as well.
It's so much harder.
They learn so much faster. They can look up what you're trying to teach them in, 10 seconds.
That's right. Which is why online teaching makes so much sense.
Well, it does make sense, but I think human contact is the side, right? It's the connection side. It's why I was able to do well from school to business, because I was able to build long-term relationships. Building relationships is my superpower, right? So how do you make sure in this environment that there's still that connection? But I just read an article the other day, and I put it on, I consult a company, and I put it in there as a fun fact because it was the marketing department. And I said, okay, fun fact. 8 seconds is the attention span of someone watching your ad or reading anything. 8 seconds.
If you don't grab them.
So imagine these kids, to apply it to the school portion. 8 seconds isn't a long time to keep their attention span. But, you know, as far as school goes, in my little itty bitty opinion, is that the teachers need to be supported from the top, that there are teachers that do inspire.
Sure. We all have a favorite teacher.
My best friend is a second grade school teacher, and she's hilarious. And she had a lot of brothers and sisters. I called her the other day and I said, who snakes it out better? You know, this thing, because I can't do it. I'm uncoordinated.
I can't do it.
My book editor, we were on our way to a boozy brunch for our lunch for our birthday.
A boozy brunch.
In the middle of a work day, right? And I call her and she answers the phone. She goes, give me a couple minutes. She literally puts the kids all on video and says, my best friend needs a little lesson on how to snake it out. The whole class was teaching me how to snake it out.
I love that.
Even for them to take a mental break and have a good time. And it just changes the energy, because she keeps it fun, and she can teach and still keep it fun.
Yeah. And we all had that favorite teacher.
Right. So there's ways that you could be your own teacher, but I think it would be really helpful if from the top, the same way Yale is trying to incorporate it, the same way I was trying to get a grant to incorporate it to a certain school system outside of LA, to incorporate the extracurricular activities it's a version of self-help. How can I incorporate this in my everyday life to improve myself, my friendships, and my work relationships? And how amazing that working through communication and self-awareness can help you become successful in your career.
Yeah, and communication and self-awareness and awareness and how you affect other people.
Well, it's both. How do I see myself, and how do other people perceive me, right?
That's
when
right.
I gave that example on Saturday
That's right.
of the feedback, I was just I was doing something that I thought was the greatest thing ever.
Right.
But it wasn't, it made them feel inferior, what they felt, they felt like I took their job away, right? Sometimes you need to let people do their jobs.
Yeah.
You can over-deliver.
Absolutely. When you're trying to help, but sometimes it's not received that way. And so you have to be aware of that. And even if you make the mistake, the person who can say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. That was not.
We all want to add value.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you just are completely only adding value to someone else and not letting them add value to your life, that's how it feels good. That's how you're appreciated, when you get to add value. So there's so many just different dynamics. So it just would be so wonderful if this was just from the top, that, you know, these important conversations are having. And I did see at my kids, their private school that the kids go to, my niece and nephew, they had a whole board on empathy, and I was like taking pictures. I was so excited because they obviously had at least one class, and they had at least an hour on empathy, and 1 hour is better than nothing.
No hours. Yeah. I had a client years ago whose son was struggling with some really heavy stuff in college, and she kept trying to help him. She's an attorney and she's very smart, and she kept trying to help him. And she finally was like, you know what, we have to go see a therapist because I can't help you. So the therapist finally said to my client, you know, you think you're being empathetic and compassionate by giving him solutions to his problem. Empathy and compassion are not solving people's problems, just making them feel heard and cared about. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. Yeah. It's such an easy explanation, but that's not like one of the vocabulary words you learn in 4th grade, and you should.
Hopefully that's changing. That's the chapter that I wrote about the book, was empathy.
Yeah, I know.
And how to use that during difficult times. And it was like, you can't fix how they're feeling because you're not feeling it. You could be there and be supportive. And
that's right.
One of the examples I used was, okay, you both had gone through the death of your father. Let's just, for let's just say. And one was a daddy's girl, and you guys were so close, and you had this really special relationship. And then the other person's father was, it was tumultuous. It was felt toxic. Maybe he was an absent dad, and there was just a different grieving process of those two examples. So you can't walk in and say, I understand how you feel. You don't.
No, I mean, listen, it's kind of like, and I keep going back to where we are in the world, but I so think that your excellence in emotional intelligence applies right now to this. And
it does.
Right? So the way you're talking about how the grieving of two daddies, whether one was a horrible human being and one was the best, just your vision of that dad was a horrible human being versus a great human being.
Right.
It's like, I can't believe I just lost my train of thought again.
No, you're good. That's normal.
Oh,
that's good. God. Now you're not superhuman. You're normal.
My superpower is opening the refrigerator and not knowing why I did that.
That's great.
Coming downstairs and wondering why I came downstairs.
Maybe that's better. Maybe you'll find something you didn't plan on eating.
Right. Okay, wait a minute. I got to get back to it because we were talking about, oh my God.
I think that the fact that you
I got it. Wait, I got it. So like the idea that you're in the same boat, but your boats aren't made the same way. One's like a cruise ship and one's got a hole in it. It's a little tiny boat. You know what I mean? And so in this time, while we are, here we go. I got it. I'm back on track.
Okay. So good.
we are all in this together. We do all have very different boats. And for people to say, you know, I get it. I understand. Yeah. Not everybody does understand everybody's way in this. And so if you, this is going to sound beauty pageanty, so forgive me for this, but you're beautiful, you're smart, that's perfect. What 3 things about emotional intelligence would you suggest people try to navigate these times?
I would say first is let's just go to the basics of it. Let me do my brain gap. Let's see what I got.
That's okay.
It's expressing, controlling, and evaluating in a good way to be able to act on these things. So being able to communicate is expressing, right? Being able to control your emotions till you fully understand or you're communicating properly, because sometimes we just go.
Instead of stopping and thinking and counting to 10 before you yell at somebody.
And then think about how you're going to express this. I would say those are really important. And, you know, like we've talked about self-awareness, but the hallmark of you being really successful and using your EQ is that self-awareness. But it's all tied to that, right?
Yeah.
Self-aware enough to take a beat, self-awareness enough to want to understand the whole picture.
Yeah. Okay. Say the 3 things again. You don't have to reiterate what they mean.
Control, evaluate, and express.
I love that. I love that.
Your emotions.
Yeah. Because then you can be careful to make certain that you make other people comfortable with how you're feeling and express it all at the same time.
Well, it's easier to solve problems. It makes people more connected to you in the first place.
Yeah.
And by the way, I was just listening to Brene Brown, and we were
love her
vulnerability. Yeah, she's awesome. But it's something that I've said, you know, a ton of times too. We trust people when we see their vulnerabilities. We trust them more.
Yeah.
And it just reiterated all the things. I'm like, yes. My imperfections are why people trusted me. Yeah. So she only was validated. Sometimes I could write a book and then become a self-proclaimed expert. Right. But it's always so nice when another, you know, someone that you look up to validates your thought process as well. So it was like, yes, what a great reminder for me of someone who talks about it all the time. But to hear it again is just, it was a gift for me, even in that moment, just to even hear a version of mine regurgitated in such a beautiful way.
Was that the first time you heard her stuff?
Oh, I know. I'd listened to it. It's just, I was listening to one of her books recently, Dare to Lead. Yeah. So
I'm going to wrap it up with this. Do you think that emotionally intelligent people are happier than people I mean, obviously there's some people with a little bit of both, but the people who have, do you think emotionally intelligent people are happier than people who just have a high IQ, or than most people?
I think that if you don't, I think you're robbing yourself of really important feelings that will leave you to live a really rich life, which means you're going to take more chances. If you live in just the logic side, it's really much harder to take risks. And there was a really interesting thing I read also recently, and I can't tell you where I read it right now. I can't even Google it. I just know I read it. I read so much. It was saying how there was a study done of all the valedictorians that graduated from the top of their class. And it turns out that they were the ones that really didn't change the world. They stayed in this really safe place of being.
I read the same article.
Oh, amazing. So yeah. They stayed in this really, really safe place. And it was the ones that were feeling vulnerable and were taking risks that really changed the world. And I think I look up to the people that are high IQ because that's my shit, right? I have shit too. We all have shit.
Absolutely.
I look up to people that are the valedictorians, the people that, graduate from Harvard at the top of their class. Like, I admire that. I look up to that. I envy it. It's like, and I don't know, it's not like I'm jealous. I envy it.
Yeah, envy's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and it's, I admire it. So I would give up some of my EQ for that, right? But what I would, the only thing I would say is, like, I think really living a truthful life is not living in that gray, in the safe space. I think
in the box. Living
life is really taking those really high risks and feeling the real low lows. Yeah. And I think you don't get that unless you put yourself and you're taking chances and growing that emotional intelligence bucket to really feel life.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why 85% of successful people or closing deals or finding success is in that bucket, because they're taking chances. They're willing to take risks. They're willing to fail and look at it. They'll find a way to look at it as a stepping stone. But I think to truly live life, you got to feel shit. And it's scary, and it's a work in progress forever. I mean, sometimes I'm like, I've done so much self-work only to find out I still have so much more to do. And I told you offline, there was a silver lining for me in this and reevaluating what success looks like. And I feel like there's a huge missed opportunity if people during this time of just everything going on in the world for not to take reevaluate what success looks like. And to be really candid and clear, a lot of mine was tied to, money. And that is not even where I'm the most, if I had to tell you what my superpower was, it's building relationships and it's having great people around me, and it's surrounding myself with love. And my big things aren't created around money.
Right.
It was all based on the success of who I was as a person, and getting back to that has been like amazing for me.
Well, I think chasing the almighty dollar is never a way to make money. I think people who chase their passion.
That's a learned trait.
Yeah.
It's a learned trait.
You're right. And I just think that chasing your passion, if you're doing something you love, you should be successful, because how can you not be good at doing something you love?
Well, it sounds like you guys have a good balance of the logic and the EQ side in the family, because the way you've talked about your children, they're both brilliant, but they're able to express this creative side. Yeah. So you've done a beautiful thing of combining both gifts. And, when I find that is one of the places where I'm like, oh my God, they're logical and they have high EQ. This is amazing. It's my dream. So, you gave babies to that. You gave that gift to your children to have this beautiful balance of both.
I hope that during this time, Everybody has that rebirth of that. And that if it wasn't learned at home, that they're learning it, whether it's on a Yale class online or watching a YouTube thing with you and me. I feel like the idea that not just emotional risk taking, but in business, taking risks. If you don't take a risk of either making every dollar or losing every dollar, chances are you're going to stay in that box that you described all about the valedictorians staying in. You're going to, and the truth is, that world doesn't exist anymore. You can't go to work for Michelin tires for 50 years and retire. You don't do that anymore.
Right.
You know, and again,
people stay with companies because they're emotionally connected to the company,
which is great.
Not necessarily today for safety. It's
right.
They will sacrifice a little less income now because the company has purpose behind it, or they create purpose. So that's great for the next generation. I think it's our responsibility to encourage that.
Absolutely.
So we're better people.
Yeah. And that's what I think emotional intelligence does. I think it makes people better people. I'm
so glad that you really have taken such an interest in it and had such a great dialogue of passion about it, because you see it how you really get how it's such a special tool. And if you have that gift, or you want to focus on it, how much and more enriched your life can be, even if even if it feels scarier at times.
Yeah, and by scary is good. The scary is okay. If you're not scared, how are you going to learn? And so, right? What do you have to learn from doing everything perfectly?
Yeah. Well, there's no way to know if you're really happy unless you've been really sad.
That's
or
right.
really risk. So
there's
no way to know what the difference of the feelings are, right?
Yeah. Feel it all, everybody. Feel it all. Read Tami's book, From C Student to the C-Suite. Whether you are in the corporate world or a musician or an artist, it will touch your life. It will connect you to your vulnerability, and it will help you seek the comfort of others and give comfort to others, for certain. And I just think it was brilliant, and I can't wait to read the new chapter in the other book and whatever else you write. And
should we show them a picture of it?
Can we please?
Okay. So
explain the front of it.
Okay, so just real quick, that you just be yourself. Like, look how much fun this character of me is having. She's like, whatever.
Martini in hand.
Table. But I think just actually, like, you get extra credit when you are being yourself, and people do see the flaws. And perfection's overrated. Then no one trusts you if you think you know everything. And just be yourself. And if I could be successful, anyone can. That's just no question.
I love that.
So, give yourself a chance.
Well, you don't act like you're perfect. The idea that you would never be successful after talking to you, looking at you, hearing you, reading your book, I couldn't see how that could ever happen. And you are a wonderful mentor. And I hope to God that my daughter and you someday get to meet. And because I don't plan on this ending here, by the way. So if you want me out, you have to tell me.
That's my personality. If I like you, you're stuck with me forever.
I hope you feel the same way, because I think you could help.
You're hilarious. So we had the funniest text exchange. I was like, I mean, she knows that I called her a whippersnapper.
And then I told her I was no whippersnapper. I was a nincompoop.
Yeah. Which is in the book too. Yeah. Well, now I know where you got the nincompoop.
I actually don't remember that. I just felt like something my grandmother would have said. So I said it back.
I have nincompoop in the book.
How do I not remember that?
A cartoon of it too. I don't know where it is.
Maybe because I probably don't remember that because I listened to it on my Kindle.
Here it is.
Let me see.
Oh, you listen to it. Nincompoop. Here's the cartoon character, Nincompoop. So you're definitely on the same page as me.
That's right. What page are we on, by the way?
It's page 18.
Okay. I loved this. I am so grateful for getting to meet you, getting to talk to you, and reading your book. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for such an important conversation. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your time, honey. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.